want to take up anybody's time too much, but I just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining today. I'm going to give a quick introduction. So welcome to the Roundtables from Chapel in New York. For those that don't know, the Roundtables began with our International Fundraising Across Borders, the IFAB conference that we had back in November. And at IFAB, it grew out of a history that Chapel in New York have had for 25 years of working with organisations and not-for-profit organisations all over the globe. At IFAB, we gathered a huge amount of knowledge and resources, and we wanted to continue that discussion and what was being presented. So we created these roundtables so that we could carry that on throughout the year. We're delighted today to be joined by Martin Kaufman, and he was one of the speakers at IFAB. And Martin lives in London, but has lived all over the world, and he's been developing fundraising experience for 30 years. As a senior consultant at the International Major Gifts Consultancy, Breakley, and as principal at his own consultancy, Martin Kaufman Philanthropy, as well as running a fundraising program at organisations such as the Architectural Association. He's been involved in Europe cultural fundraising in Sweden, Switzerland, Germany, and Italy, as well as Asia, Africa, Australia. He's truly international. Currently, Martin is supporting Chapel in New York, helping with the FI UK, apologies if I say that wrong. It's a UK charity supporting the National Trust for Italy, is FI, and he's developing an effective fundraising vehicle to support their work to protect Italian heritage. A busy chap, and he's also co-founding the Chartered Institute of Fundraising Cultural Sector Network, as well as the chair of RAISE Steering Committee, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But it's a network funded by the Arts Council of England to strengthen cultural fundraising, which I think will interest a lot of people here. They have particularly been active during the pandemic, and they have created a large online program with a global audience, and are just about to publish the results of the survey from UK cultural fundraisers during COVID. So it's really lovely to have Martin here. He's fresh from the French session that we just had just an hour ago. So he's kind of in the moment. So thank you for quickly joining us, Martin. So going back to the roundtables, it's hosted by Chapel in New York Foundation. I'm British, but I represent the Netherlands Foundation because I live here in the Netherlands and I've been here for a long time. And I've fundraised in the UK and throughout Europe, helping organisations also throughout the world on different sectors, not just arts and culture. I don't want to be doing too much talking today. I want to hand that over to everybody else because we've received some questions and I hope that everybody can contribute. So I want to make this interactive as possible. And the idea is to share knowledge. So a little bit of housekeeping before we head off. We are recording this session because there's a few people that couldn't make it today. So we're going to be sharing the recording afterwards. If you don't want to take part in the recording, then please do let me know. Just send me a quick comment in the comments box. Please feel free also to write your questions in the comments box because I can read them and I can read them out loud, or you can ask them yourselves, whichever you're more comfortable with. Please do feel free to raise your virtual hand. It's a little thing in the reactions down on the bottom right. And please, could you say your name? I think most people have it anyway, but it'd be helpful for myself and for Martin. You could quickly say your name and your organisation before your question. And we will be sending out a questionnaire after the event. It will take 5 minutes and your feedback is really, really appreciated because we're doing more and more of these and we want to make them much better or as better as we can for them. So that's a lot of me talking. I'd also like to encourage you to circulate this event and what you feel about it. It's all good to friends and colleagues in social media as well. So I'm going to stop talking now. Maybe Martin, do you want to give a really quick intro about you before we completely kick off?
You've been over flattering, and thank you so much. And in fact, I just have to say that it's very interesting coming from a French language, English language translation session for the last hour, and I'm aware that at least 50% or more of you are not first language English speakers, so I will do my best to be as clear as possible. First of all, can I just say it's absolutely wonderful. Some of my favorite organizations are here. The Anne Frank Museum, I see that Levine Raouf I don't know how you pronounce it. I'm sorry, I've mispronounced your name. I have to say, if you've never been to the Anne Frank Museum, there is no museum in the whole world that has affected me emotionally as much as that place. If you didn't find out anything else about the Holocaust, go to the Anne Frank Museum. I love the Royal Pavilion in Brighton. I see that Rosie Littlehales is here. It is this fantastic Indian-Chinese Regency confection, and it really displays its work well. Well done. The LSO, of course, what can I say? Great orchestra. And Joanna Wells, I think we know each other, and you're from the Chelsea Physic Garden, and we've met, I know, in different museums, in different places, I think at the Watts Gallery and others. So it's great to see you. I'm sorry I don't know the rest of you, but I hope that to get to know you eventually. I just want to say a couple of things around fundraising during the pandemic internationally, and some of it comes straight from what I've just discussed. Many of you either have or are thinking of having an overseas branch to support you for fundraising. And I'm working with Fondo Ambiente Italiano in UK, FI UK at the moment, in order to make them much more effective for fundraising, for them to send money to Italy, to raise money in the UK, to send it to Italy. One of the key lessons that is coming out of my work with FI is that if you want to set up a really effective overseas operation, apart from you've got to have the legal and fiscal arrangements to do so. Either you set up a charity like FI UK in the UK, or you work with an agency like Chapel in York to work through one of their foundations. That's the first thing. But secondly, what you need are you need people who are very connected to the home country. So half of the board of FI UK are some of the best connected Italians in Britain. But you also have to have people very well connected with the country in which you're operating on. So don't just have people just knowing a lot about the United States and not knowing a lot about the Netherlands, for example. You've got to have both people who are very connected to the home country and very connected to the country they're working in. Now, one of the things that Helen just briefly mentioned is that I'm the co-author of a study, the only UK cultural fundraising survey during the pandemic. It's called Dealing with the Crisis, and it will come out in about 10 days' time. And some of the lessons are just as important for international fundraising as they are for UK fundraising. Adapting to new ways of working and increasing social media and digital activity. Goodness gracious, I can tell you, I'm going to give you some of my favorite stories about digital during the pandemic. Maintaining existing relationships, how important is that? And in fact, many organizations have survived for making sure that they steward and ask again those who are already close to them. Being aware that while incomes may fall in some areas, they can rise in the other. I did a session with the Metropolitan Opera in New York online through the RAISE program. And it was very interesting. The Metropolitan Opera had 2,000 online donors before COVID and 8,000 online donors as a result of COVID. Another issue that is very important for fundraisers, and it's not just whether it's international or not, is about the stress of the workload and the importance of well-being. We've all got to look after ourselves. And a healthy fundraising organization will be an organization in which the board of directors and the senior management are concerned about the pressure put on fundraisers. If they're not doing that in your organization, you need to start addressing that, because otherwise people will leave the cultural sector. They will leave fundraising, and we need to make sure that there is resilience. And lastly, although there's lots of great training opportunities, the RAISE program, whose steering committee I chair, has done wonderful monthly and sometimes fortnightly online seminars where we have trebled our engagement with our audiences and have them globally rather than just the UK. Government support wherever possible is really important. Now, in the UK, the government, and I've been a continuing critic on this, was very, very, very slow to act. Eventually, however, they formed the Cultural Recovery Fund, which has helped enormous numbers of organizations. But there are always organizations, for whatever reasons, that fall below the line. For those of you who don't have government funding, I think that's even more of a challenge. But what that challenge is, therefore, to double your ask for your private patrons and your private donors. I want to just end this session by giving you a couple of stories. One is an international story from the London Library. The London Library is a private library, very famous, 150, 200 years old in the center of London. And they have just raised £200,000 for their COVID appeal. And that's just to make sure that they could keep afloat because they weren't getting anybody coming into the London Library. But they got £40,000 of that from their international donors. They have an international circle and they have an international and a US circle, and they got much funding. So out of 200,000, which was a very good result from a fairly small library, 40,000 of that came internationally. And if you go onto the London Library's website, there is a brilliant infographic. If you Google London Library COVID appeal, you will find this great infographic which shows the relationship between international support and their homegrown support. I'd just like to also say something about FI in Italy and working with FI UK. They've done a couple of really interesting webinars because people cannot travel. If you're working internationally, if you've got a museum or a gallery and people cannot go to the Royal Pavilion in Brighton or they cannot go to the Anne Frank House, then make sure the Anne Frank House and the Royal Pavilion go to your donors abroad. So what FI UK have done, they did a series called From Your Sofa. So they've allowed people from their sofas to go round their properties. And they've also done something called Postcards from Italy, where they've shown the results of a mass program, which is everybody votes throughout Italy for their favorite historic sites. And I found things that I never knew about Italy. I didn't know. This would be interesting to the Royal Pavilion. There is an amazing Moorish palace in Italy owned by FI that reminded me so much of the Royal Pavilion. If you contact me afterwards, Rosie, I'll let you know about this. I would like to end up by saying my favorite stories are not international. They are of two organizations that I support. One is English National Opera, which amongst other things, because they've had no opera, they had a fantastic session with their board of directors and their supporters. And I've never actually seen anything like this in terms of tearing the veil away from a trustee board and letting each of the trustees individually talk to their supporters. That was a wonderful experience. They also did a drive-in opera at Alexandra Palace, and they had all of because people couldn't clap, everybody in their cars turned on their headlights when they wanted to clap the singers. So you had these constant lights going on and off. But the other, I will end up by saying an organization which has done fantastically well and that everybody can learn from in the pandemic is another organization I support called English Touring Opera. And that moves around the country. And I mean, literally, the program was pulled out from them in their first week. What they have done is that they have allowed people like me, their donors and their supporters, to have private conversations with their directors, with their choreographers, with their librettists, with their singers, either in groups or in small rooms. They do this regularly, and I feel so much more engaged to them as a result of their online effort. So I think there's some very negative things that have come out of this whole experience, but a lot of positive things. I think we should be looking to the hybrid future, where we learn both internationally and nationally how we take advantage of what we've learned in the pandemic and take that into the future. I'm here for questions, and I'd like to hear you talking to each other too.
Wow. There's so much there to begin with. We had some questions already sent in, and maybe one thing that you sort of just touched on is because physical organizations, like you can't physically, or you haven't been able to physically walk into a museum or a gallery. How have organizations, and we've given some examples there, but how can fundraising organizations create a distinctive experience? And again, you've touched on some, but one of the questions was creating that experience that you can't actually physically get.
Well, I'm going to give you a great example, because I've just seen it from the Rijksmuseum in the Netherlands, and I see that there's several Dutch organizations here. The Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Their most famous painting is Rembrandt's The Night Watch, and they have spent 5 million euros in a research program to make sure this incredibly important painting, the star attraction in a wonderful gallery, does not deteriorate. 5 million is phase 1, and soon they will be starting phase 2, which is the actual restoration. But because people can't, their audience base as a result of the pandemic fell from 3 million to 600,000. What they've done is 2 things. They have taken a copy of the Rijksmuseum painting, The Night Watch by Rembrandt, and taken it round lots of care homes in the Netherlands. So this enormous reproduction painting has gone round to care homes, so people who have been very isolated, have been in a very difficult situation, have had a curator and an art technologist talk about the painting in front of the residents and actually engage with them. And they raised a lot of money from, I think, the Elizabeth Art Foundation in order to fund that direct connection between care home residents during the pandemic and the work of the Rijksmuseum. Secondly, they decided that they would actually restore this painting online and in front of the visitors. So instead of the painting being restored in the laboratories of the Rijksmuseum, it will be restored in the gallery behind a big glass wall with all of the high-tech equipment, but you will be able to see it online. And again, this is the most wonderful fundraising opportunity in order to make sure that this painting is not only restored, but that you're using the fact that you can't go into the museum to blow open the barriers and engage people. That's a tip.
Has anybody got any questions about that? Because that's, fascinating and quite inspiring. Are there any questions about how you can engage people digitally without actually, them being able to come into the physical space?
Helen, I think there's bunches of examples I get probably one a day of organizations that have used this opportunity where people have been looking for experiences that they could do from their desk, from their kitchen table. And, the ability, as Martin was saying, and with Five, for example, that to take you backstage of things and to show you things that you would never be, when you're focused on real life people coming to your venue, whether it's arts, whether it's culture, whether it's music, whatever it is, Whereas people have really had an opportunity to think outside the box. And I think that those organizations that have first of all not been afraid to reach out to people in the last couple of years. I think a lot of arts groups and you know, this thing has said, oh my God, we're not dealing with the pandemic, we're not dealing with health, we're not looking after children, nobody's going to want to give to us, and have sat back, have really kind of lost an opportunity, because those organizations that have said we are worth existing, and the people that we have that love us will want us to exist when this this whole thing ends. And so we're going to reach out to them in whatever ways we can, whether it's the back catalog of operas, whether it's, you know, taking you with a handheld camera behind the scenes of you know, of something that you wouldn't ordinarily be willing to show people. People have been amazed at what goes on, because so often you go to see a performance, you go to see something, and you don't get to see the back workings. And this has been a wonderful opportunity to do that. So I think that that's one thing, as Martin has been saying, that this is an opportunity that should continue to exist, which is to use your assets to involve people in ways, particularly when you're talking about international fundraising, particularly when you're talking about people who may visit a country once or may visit once a year, so that your stewardship has always been a real issue of how do you keep people involved in something when they're not here all the time. And we've had lots of examples of that. And this has been a wonderful opportunity to do that. The other thing that it's proved, and I know Martin feels this way as well, is that it has demonstrated the importance of stewardship in keeping people involved, because this has not been the time to reach out to new people. This has been the time to reach out to, well, it has been, and it has been successful in reaching out to new people, but it's also been a chance to really get those people who you have been investing your time and effort for, and to keep those people more engaged, because those are the ones who are going to rush forward to help you.
Can I just come in quickly, because I do want to stop talking, and I completely agree with Nancy. I'd just like to talk about events, because I think that we know that people can see operas, they can see plays, they can come into museums, but can you do gala fundraising? I've come across in the last, just now and a week ago, two great examples of online gala fundraising. One is the Paris Opera, the Palais Garnier in Paris, and Jean-Yves Cassed, who's on the other, on the roundtable I've just left, has just described a wonderful, I think he said it was a ballet gala, where people paid money to have a special dinner in their own home. Now, I don't know how that actually was done, but I suspect it was done fairly similar to the National Gallery of Singapore. And they've done an amazing things. They had a pandemic online gala with I think a relationship with 12 different restaurants. So and they had 12 different scenarios. So you would I don't know the precise detail, but the way he described it, his name is Kola. You would pay your entry to the gala, and you say, I want this contemporary painter, and you'd have a setting of that contemporary painter or whatever, but you'd have a certain dinner maybe related to that. But at the end result is everybody feels engaged, they raised a lot of money, and they've got over the fact that they couldn't meet up. Now, nobody is saying that it's better to do this online than face-to-face, but it's much better to do it online than not at all. Enough of me. Let's hear from you.
Rosie, did you have a question? You raised your hand.
Hi, thanks, Martin. That was great, really interesting. And hello, Nancy. We did meet some time ago on a train coming back from London, and we had a very good chat, and I haven't forgotten you, and I will be in touch. But the Royal Pavilion and Museums has been through a turbulent time as we've moved from being a local authority to becoming an independent trust in the middle of a COVID pandemic. So it's been pretty stressful. So what you were saying was very interesting about digital offerings, and we're just about to launch this week a digital tour of the Royal Pavilion, which is this extraordinary, exotic royal palace that belonged to George IV. For those of you who are not in the UK and perhaps don't know very much about it, I urge you to go online and have a look. It's unique, and it's probably the most beautiful and exotic palace in Europe. And we've just put together a digital tour through all the main rooms of the palace, voiced with a 360-degree spin on each room, and then with a voiceover by David Beavers, who's the keeper, and Alexandra Loska, who is the curator, both of them at the Royal Pavilion. And so it's a fabulous offering. I've seen it. I haven't seen it fully finished, but it's great. What I'm interested in is how we get that to international audiences and to people who can't visit the UK this summer. How do we market that? How do we get people to know that it's there? Because at the moment it seems that it'll be sitting on the website and it's very passive, and we're waiting for people to come to us. And I'm interested to know if anyone has experience of getting something like this out there. Probably it's in English at the moment, but so we're probably talking about Europe, America, Australia, places like Hong Kong being our main audience, I would guess. I'm open to any ideas.
I'd be happy to answer, but I'd rather hear other people.
It's open to the floor. Has anybody got any thoughts about how Rosie markets her amazing digital offering? Maybe Martin, you begin, and that might inspire other people.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, Jeroen.
Sorry, hi, I'm Jeroen. I'm sorry for my ridiculously Dutch name. It's sort of impossible to pronounce for English people. I used to work in Oxford for 2 years at the university as a fundraiser, and it was very difficult for people to pronounce my name. So I do apologize. I work for the Kunsthal Museum in Rotterdam, the Netherlands.
You don't have a Dutch accent, Jeroen.
Well, that's what 2 years of Oxford does to you. You lose everything. I was wondering, do you work with international tourist organizations or tourist boards, for example, if you want to?
No, that's a very good point. I'm not sure that we do. This is probably a consequence of being a local authority organization for a long time. Right. And so we're very much trying to launch ourselves on the international stage. It'll be a very slow start, I'm sure. But if you do know of any international organizations, tourist organizations, I'd be really interested to have details.
I know what we do at the Kunsthal. We work quite closely together, and I can imagine that might be the same for other Dutch organizations with the NBTC, which is basically the Dutch Tourist Board. And they've got different departments in different countries. And I can imagine that you must have the same sort of equivalent organization in the UK. And you can always contact them to see if they have potential partners that might be interested in, telling your story, and about, especially if you've got that wonderful online opportunity on your website. It might be a thing for people who are not able to travel to the UK or to Brighton.
Yeah,
that might want to see it online and get enthusiastic about what you can offer. We've always noticed that works quite well.
Thank you. That's a good. I can explore that.
It's a really good idea. I would add to that the word collaborators. So it's very interesting. You say, I didn't know that you were making this transition from a local authority funded museum to becoming a private foundation. So I was going to ask, have you already got US or international donors? But maybe you don't.
No,
okay.
We don't. No.
So have you thought about conversations with collaborators such as the National Trust, who have the Royal Oak Foundation in the United States,
I know about, yes,
World Monuments Fund in particular, and organizations like the Victoria and Albert Museum? You will be a junior partner in any discussions, but there is no reason why you couldn't be talking about collaboration. And you could also look at, in addition to what Jerome says about the tourist organizations, when I worked for the Terracotta Warriors exhibition at National Museums Liverpool, we opened up conversations with the China-British Council and other trade commercial organizations with different countries. So you could look at, if you take your case for support and analyze the key drivers for attraction with certain types of companies, or so for instance, I know the Royal Pavilion has fantastic wallpaper.
Exactly.
So I would see, are there any design companies or design agencies, even the Design Council, which have international links, to see if you can piggyback on top of them. And the purpose of doing this is to start identifying overseas supporters. It's one of the first things you would do, I think. That's just a tip.
Thank you.
I would also, I don't know, I mean, it's just an idea, but the Association of Independent Museums as well, I think they have quite a good reach from what I kind of know about them. So again, kind of going on Martin's thoughts as well, and Jerome's as well, collaboration, and to reach out broader than just your scope and think, well, who do I know? I think the kind of the benefits of collaboration in lots of different ways actually really would help. So yeah, I think like Martin said, you know, thinking outside of the box, and I think the Design Council is quite an interesting way to go as well, and kind of looking at the designy kind of things and architecture and, you know, that sort of thing. I think that's quite an interesting way to look at it.
Rosie, I'd also look at the Cooper Hewitt in New York, which is a wonderful museum of design. I'd also make certain it's on the Brighton, if you can get it on the Brighton website itself, so that if people are thinking about coming to the UK, you know, lots of people do sort of look at Brighton, and, you know, making certain that people can find you. And this may be, although I sometimes think social media is pretty horrible, this may be one where social media might be able to help you in terms of getting stuff out there. You know, have a look at LinkedIn and some of the groups that people are on, etc.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a big social media fan and lots of things, but this may be one where, because what you want those people who are kind of looking around for things to be able to see you as well as the targeted stuff. Because people do, it's really bizarre that they do.
Yes.
And put it on anything royalty. See if you can get, by the way, there's all these bizarre magazines that Americans particularly love. You know, anything Majesty, all that kind of stuff, the magazines, see if they'll put it in there, because those you know, foreigners love that stuff. So and you really want those people to highlight you.
What Nancy is saying is a key lesson for all fundraising. You cannot fundraise if people don't know about you.
Yeah.
So marketing and communications are the bedfellows of fundraising. And if you want international donors, you can't just say to your board, can you tell me the one person you know in New York? You need to spread that around. I'd like to broaden that question and ask to those organizations here who do have overseas groups of donors, how useful has it been during the pandemic?
No, we've got shaking heads from the Throb Museum.
Can I start? Because we look after...
No, Nancy, I'm going to interrupt you. I think we've enough from you and me. I think we should really listen to others.
Well, I was just going to say, we've got 50 clients that are doing this. And so it's a really interesting across the board experience of how people have done. Then I'll be glad to open it up. But you know, because we do this on a daily basis. And again, the things that people were talking about before, which is those with really an engaged group of international people abroad, those did well. Those that were creative did well. And you know, and those that actually got asked, that was such an important thing, is that those people that asked, we had a client who got $1 million just because they literally said to their US ambassadors, we need money. Nobody is visiting us. can you, and those people who had been giving $1,000 or $10,000 stepped up to the plate because they were asked and the need was there. So, and we've also had clients who've done absolutely nothing, took the view that this wasn't the time to do it, and not surprisingly, they didn't get anywhere. So I will now shut up too.
Can I just add, Nancy, that what you said about creativity, that is so important. That's key in everything that for us during the pandemic has been so important, because what Martin started off with the Rijksmuseum and the Night Watch painting, that was a collaboration between them and their principal sponsor, Philips, who are heavily invested. They used to make light bulbs, but now they're heavily invested in medical equipment. And the thing is, I know about this collaboration because one of my closest friends from university is an educator at the Rijksmuseum, and she came up with this idea. But it's such a clever way of marketing, because everyone is talking about the night watch traveling to old people homes, to hospitals, but it's a very clever collaboration between them and Philips, because it gives Philips the platform, without saying it out loud, to present themselves to the healthcare system. Look at us and look at what we do, and look at our equipment that we make, while sort of fostering art and culture and letting the night watch travel across the Netherlands. So it's such a clever and intricate way of combining two things together. So you've got the sponsorships and your own sort of how people look at you during the pandemic, and to get visitors and the broader audience do not forget you.
Well, I'm going to ask, on the basis of that, Frank Alderinks from ABN AMRO, listening to what Jeroen has said about Philips' sponsorship, that actually, in a way, there's a soft marketing from Philips as a result of this really important venture. You in the banking and business world, how have you changed your practice in terms of the supporting of international fundraising, or are you waiting to see what's going to happen afterwards?
Yeah. It's good to explain. I'm the head of the philanthropy department of ABN AMRO.
Yeah.
It means that we advise our clients, and what we have seen during the pandemic, that there is it was really a momentum for our clients to come into action, and that was a lot Corona related. So that was not in the first position arts and culture, I must say. So I think it is always very important to reach out, and what I heard before, to reach out with your communication and your marketing towards the public, and to address the needs. And that also makes the conversation for us philanthropic advisors more easy to bring the topic of art and cultures on the table. We see a lot of collaboration in the Netherlands now at the moment from endowment funds who work together and to support arts and culture. So that's a good thing. And I'm really happy about that on the side of endowment funds and philanthropists, people come together and also support your sector.
And have you had museums and galleries and cultural organizations coming to you and to say, we've got a challenge here? Do you know anybody within your client network who would be interested in this?
I must say, from all sectors they do. So also not particularly more or less. So arts and culture are also represented. I got a lot of, and also my colleagues, a lot of questions and asks for donations. I think again, collaboration and reach out as a sector towards philanthropists and towards endowment funds would also help. And we see, for example, that the Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds in the Netherlands is doing that, and that makes the bigger story.
Yeah.
And then it comes back with our clients in the discussions, in the conversations we have.
That's an interesting point. I'd come back to Rosie's questions about the Royal Pavilion. One of the things you might look at is whether the equivalent of the very, very big charitable trusts in the UK, like the Prins Bernhard's Fonds in the Netherlands, or the King Baudouin Foundation in Belgium and the US, whether they would just to have a conversation with them, because you're making this transition in this very difficult environment, and to open up a conversation, whether it's with Claude Duffield or the Western Foundation or Garfield Weston or Wolfson or whatever, to see whether there are some possible links. One of the reasons being is I'm saying that to Rosie because the Royal Pavilion is fantastically well known as an attraction, but not at all well known in fundraising terms. So I wondered if some of the organizations here are probably less well known in their countries. So I don't know, for instance, the Tropen Museum, you're saying Hogenraad. Could you tell us about your experience? Because I'm very sorry, I don't know about the Tropen Museum.
All right, well, hello everybody, my name is Josine. I work for the Tropen Museum that has merged with the Museum of Volkenkunde and the Africa Museum in the Netherlands. And together we are the National Museum of World Cultures. We also collaborate with the World Museum in Rotterdam, but that's a municipal institution, whereas the other three are funded by the national government. And actually throughout COVID, we've been in a quite luxurious position, thanks to the government that has supported us very friendly, I must say. Nevertheless, we have closed the museums for, well, the whole of this year, many months last year. So we're all very anxious to reopen again and to welcome the visitors again. And in the meantime, we've been busy with starting up online activities, but they are scattered all over the place. Departments do something from their own island, I must say. So this for us is a new challenge to find some overview, and actually we would love to invest in one big platform and maybe start up a suiting membership program that does have that hybrid form that you mentioned earlier, because that is the takeaway.
I was going to say, I've been to the Tropen Museum. I think it's a fantastic museum. It's super interesting, and it deals with a lot of Dutch history. And one of the questions I was going to ask to you was, have you because the Dutch museums are still locked down, hopefully for another, well, hopefully they're going to open in another few weeks or so, hopefully. Yeah, but because of that, have you reached out to the international audience? Like, do you have a patrons set up? Do you reach out to people overseas? Because of the nature of what the information is that it explains in the museum, it involves a lot of different cultures. So is there an international reach already?
No, there's not. And I could say something about the background of our museums. The Tropen Museum is in Amsterdam and actually was started as the colonial palace. It was the national propaganda for the colonies. So it's a very dubious background, actually, but we're not shy to talk about it.
That's actually sorry to interrupt, but that's one of the things I think is great about the Tropen Museum, is because the background is controversial, but you say, look, we know it's controversial, but it is what it is, and here it is. So yeah.
Also, restitution is our number one topic, I think, at the moment. So there's lots to talk about. And for example, we're working on a China exhibition. So there are so many hooks and opportunities to start international programs, look for international donors, but it's not really happening at the moment.
Can I come in on the China program?
Yeah, please.
I think I think my video on the Terracotta Warriors exhibition was included. Was it, Helen?
Yeah, for sure. If you haven't watched it, then please do. If you, I can definitely.
Let me just say, if it's the reason being that I talk quite frankly about the pros and cons of China-related fundraising internationally. In that, so I think you'd find it interesting, and I'd be very happy to have a conversation after you've seen that about some of the takeaways, because it's an enormous potential, enormous risks. But I agree that your particular area of world culture in a period of restitution and anti-colonialism ticks so many boxes in so many donors, and of course it turns off lots of donors too.
Absolutely.
So it's about finding the donor base that will support your own case for support. So that's very, very interesting. I know we haven't got a great deal of time. There are several people who haven't spoken. Joanna from the Chelsea Physic Garden, perhaps you should just explain to people what the Chelsea Physic Garden is and whether you've had international fundraising going on.
Martin. So yes, the Chelsea Physic Garden, for those of you who don't know, is a 350-year-old garden, botanic garden on the bank of the River Thames in Chelsea. And we started as an apothecary's garden, but we're obviously now a charity, and we have been very fortunate in that we've been able to open during most of national lockdown and London lockdown as being an outdoor venue. So we've been in a very unique position. We've also run a 1 million fundraising campaign over the last 6 months because we have a capital appeal that was hugely successful. And going back to Martin's point about asking people, we had never really asked our friends, so our membership database to give before. And out of the 650 donors or so that gave to the appeal, 414 were new first-time donors, never given to the garden before, and we asked them and they gave. And we were very fortunate, and we had a matching campaign. So we ran a challenge campaign for 6 months. So we had this match grant of 500,000, and we raised the 500,000 to unlock this. So we did incredibly well. We also had support from the government, from the Cultural Recovery Fund, the 2 rounds. Going to your point about the international fundraising, one of the lead gifts came from a donor who had never given before and was an American donor, and that came through Chapel in York. So they did very well out of that. Thank you very much. But if we hadn't had that function, you know, we and I had worked with Chapel in York before at the British Library. You know, that gift would have been very difficult to have come by. That gift was somebody in cultivation, so somebody I'd known personally, but nonetheless, you know, they felt invested and were able to give. And we had a number of international donations. Again, that was through Chapel in York. We'd set that up a year or so ago, hoping that we would grow this base. And that's something I'd like to explore because we do have a few of our life friends who are American donors.
That's actually it's a good point. Thank you for sharing that, Joanna. Because one of the questions we did get asked is you know, organisations are now looking externally and looking internationally and setting up a patron program outside the UK and looking at Hong Kong or New York, or it would be interesting to kind of hear, you know, the positives, which we've kind of heard, but are there any, you know, stumbling blocks that, you know, potentially Chapel in York could help with, or is there any kind of, you know, challenges or kind of fences that people see that would stop them or prevent them from doing that, or what are people's experiences? Maybe, Josine, maybe I don't know. Do you have any kind of
Helen, can I come in
while you're pausing?
Can I come in here for a quick second? Because I think one of the things that we've seen over the years is that people feel they have to set up a dedicated legal entity. So you can't fundraise in America unless you have a 501c3. You can't fundraise in the UK without a registered charity or a Section 88 in Hong Kong. And I think what a lot of this is proven, in my opinion, I've been doing this for 25 years, setting up these entities. I would say in 90% of the cases, they are unnecessary. They are a distraction to what you're trying to do, which is fundraising. It's why we set up the charity, the foundations around the world, of which are the, obviously the ED in the Netherlands. It's because when you're trying to get money from A to B, it's not about the legal entity. It's about the hard work that goes into finding the money and winning the money, not how you want to get the tax benefits, you want to do all those kinds of things. And generally, people, I would say 95% of the time, most donors are completely comfortable with giving through an intermediary organization. The King Baudouin Foundation is involved with Europe, obviously. There are others out there, but so I would certainly say that that's almost the back end of the discussion about fundraising internationally, how you're going to, and lots of people start with that. And it's really not about that. It's about, do you have the time, the money, the product, and I would say, everybody does have the product, but do you have the time, the money, the energy, the ability, the staff to put together an effective fundraising campaign, starting from the case for support in terms of why somebody in another country should give to you, down through the prospect research, the cultivation, stewardship, all of that is possible, but it's not, in my opinion, about the entity. It's nice to be able to say to people, you can be on our board, etc., but you can give them all the same privileges and thank yous by being an advisory committee, etc., without making them legally responsible for something. So increasingly, as the world has become more difficult, as banks, with no disrespect, Frank, become a four-letter word because they're so difficult to work with and get accounts, as the regulatory requirements increase, money laundering, all that kind of thing. I would say that's not where, certainly that's not where you start, but it should absolutely not be a barrier to international fundraising.
Can I just say that we've only got 6 minutes, and I was hoping that Mafalda Oliveira would speak, but I don't know if you're still here, Mafalda. Your picture has gone, because I'd just like to hear what Puzio has to say. But Gareth Bowen, you haven't been asked to speak, and I wondered if you'd like to contribute in terms of your own experience. And whatever.
Thank you. Helen and Nancy, it's nice to see you again. My background is in fine art, teaching, and training. And so listening to you about the Night Watch and the pavilions and the English National Opera, fantastic. But I'm not involved in, it's the wrong phrase, but in the high art end. I'm involved in education and in Africa. And it came to me when I saw this course that I really have to start thinking about, how do you help education in Africa unless you are aware and supporting the art, the culture, and the particular heritage of those people who you're going to work with. And I picked up a lot this morning because few people will actually give money, I think, they'll give it for education, but they won't give it perhaps for what we are trying to do. But I have learned a lot, and I have had some ideas about how I can support what we're trying to do. So thank you for that.
Well, it's
welcome.
It's good to see you. And in fact, of course, what you're talking about also ties in with some of the concerns of Yoshina, and I may have mispronounced your name. I'm sorry. Helen, we've only got a few more minutes. Is there? I'm going to ask: is there any burning question that anybody wants to ask that we can answer, either Nancy or myself or Helen, immediately?
Maybe I have a very positive feeling because, for example, in the Netherlands, we will reopen the museum, and that will give a feeling of people who can go back to a museum or the experience, and that's maybe really a momentum to engage. That's what I felt, and maybe you also can bring that feeling abroad to over the borders to other countries. So that was one thought that I had, and I say it because we saw that, for example, charities who are dealing with nature did a huge increase the last months in donations, especially in the Netherlands. We did the research about that. And that means the feeling that you can go again to a museum and to enjoy arts is the momentum to connect. So that is my feeling.
I also want to add to that. It's a good point, Frank, but what I want to add to that is I think out of this terrible situation that we've all lived through is I think we need to take the innovation and the creativity. I mean, it's a creative sector, and I think it's really demonstrated how theatres and opera and ballet and, you know, and the museums and all of the cultural organisations have taken that and kind of adapted to it and created these amazing, you know, ideas and concepts that perhaps it wouldn't have happened had we not been in this situation. And I think we shouldn't actually, you know, lose sight of that or kind of curb that creativity, but actually kind of embrace it and keep it going and use it to kind of go on to expand and innovate and keep creating it in different fields as well. So I think it actually has caused an inspiration to think beyond where the kind of sector was, or perhaps where your organization was, to think, well, you know, what can I now do to take it or could continue this innovation and this creativity, but also to go internationally as well. And as Nancy said, although you may think there's kind of barriers to reaching out to internationals, then unless you sort of start to explore it or ask the questions, then really, you know, you don't know, but also there's not as many barriers as you might think there are.
Can I come? I'm going to be both a Jeremiah and a celebratory person. I think what you're saying, Frank, is absolutely right. And what you're saying, Helen, is right. That we're now moving away from the pandemic period to the rebirth period. And every organization needs to look at how they can be creative and operate both nationally and internationally. But the pandemic is not over. And it's a global issue, and it's a global issue about inequality, and it's a global issue. If we're talking about internationally, there will be lots of continuing restrictions on travel. There will be undoubtedly new variants. There are relative successes in vaccination and relative paucities in vaccination. So while we move into this new period, we must remember that not everybody is at the same level of success and potential that each one of you is at in different countries, whether it's the UK, whether it's the Netherlands, whether it's in other parts of Europe. So I think that we have to be absolutely celebratory and define a rebirth agenda, but we have to be cautious, and we have to understand that other people in other countries have challenges that many in the more developed countries in the West do not. I hope that isn't too much of a downer.
No, I think it's just a realistic fact, because here, you know, even in the Netherlands here, we're way behind where the UK are, you know, vaccine-wise, but we're getting there. But yes, I think it's right to be mindful of how other countries are doing and other people's situations, for sure. Changing the subject a little bit, we're running out of time. I just wondered if there are any questions before we start to summarize and start to round it up. If there are, please raise your hand or the chat. While you think of maybe another question, just to note, there is another roundtable next month on the 10th of June. We're talking about fundraising for education. So Gareth, this might interest you. 10th of June at 11 o'clock. No, sorry, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We're inviting universities, higher education, schools, anybody involved in the education sector to come along and have a similar discussion about how you fundraise through the pandemic, how you see it going forward. Yeah, so please come along, it's free, and I can send you the links along with the questionnaire that we'll be sending out. I'll also share Martin's video on the Terracotta Warriors, because that was super interesting at the IFAB. And Joanna has asked if we can see another look at your book, Martin, that you're going to publish.
It's not my book. It's the survey will be
the survey.
It will be produced in about 10 days time. So I will, if you want, I will get it out via Chapel in York to all of you.
Perfect. If you send it to me, then I can distribute it.
Joanna has got her hand up.
No, that was it, Martin. I was interested in seeing that document.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. I mean, we can distribute that for sure. If you send it to me, Martin, then I can send that out.
Well, I'll do it on an individual basis, actually.
Okay. So yeah, I just want to say thank you again to everybody. It's been really interesting hearing your stories and to see you all face to face. I've been emailing quite a lot of you, so it's good to kind of virtually meet you. Please let's stay in touch. If you do have any other questions, then please feel free to email me or send me a message on LinkedIn, whichever's preferable. And yeah, I'll be in touch with the questionnaire. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Helen.
Bye-bye.
Bye.